to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason. I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Anne-Marie can't join us today, so we will be looking forward to talking with her next week. But I do have a guest joining me today. His name is Ken Kunken, and we often have guests and co-hosts and so forth on the show here who have been through various kinds of traumatic experiences, all kinds of trials and tribulations, usually with coming out the other side and what they've learned from it, and they want to share it with the world. And that always makes for a very interesting conversation. I can't recall the last time, I'm not sure if it was ever the case, that I've had a guest on the show who's been dealing with the trials and tribulations and trauma for 54 years. But that applies to our guest today because in 1970, in a freak accident when he was in school, he was injured and it rendered him a quadriplegic, and he's been a quadriplegic to this day. 54 years later, he's alive and kicking, well, figuratively speaking. He has a book out, and we're going to learn all about him. So, Ken, welcome to the program. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me as a guest.
I'm glad to have you. And obviously, we want to get into your story pretty quickly, but I want to mention the book briefly, and we'll get back to it later on as well. But the book is, when did the book come out?
The book came out this past October, a little over a year ago.
Oh, okay.
But I'm also working on an audiobook that may be out as early as next week.
Wow, fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
And what's the name of the book?
The name of the book is I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story. And if I might just take a minute to tell you how I derived at the title. While I was a patient in the rehab center way back in now 1971, I was invited to testify before a United States Senate Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy. And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that the senator said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much.
Oh, my.
And the words on that inscription have always been very meaningful to me. The inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." And that's where I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were.
I love it. Story. Really good. Yeah. Yeah. I love anybody who's willing to dream and think beyond what is conventionally believed to be possible. So that's going to lead to a really fun conversation, I'm sure. But before we can go there, we have to find out what the story was. So take us 54 years ago back 54 years, I should say, and tell us the story.
Okay. In 1970, I was a fairly typical 20-year-old college student at Cornell University. And on the afternoon of October 31st, 1970, in America, that's Halloween.
Halloween, yeah.
I was actually playing in a lightweight football game against Columbia University. And on a kickoff, I tackled the ball carrier. And when I did, I broke my neck and damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I'm paralyzed over most of my body. I can move my left arm a little bit, but not my fingers or wrist. And on the right side of my body, I could just shrug my shoulder a bit.
Okay.
So I'm a quadriplegic and I'm paralyzed over most of my body.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I can go into all kinds of cliche type conversations, but that must have been traumatic, and that must have been a challenge to overcome mentally more than anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that. How do you go through something like that and come out the other side? I mean, obviously you do, but for most of us, especially those of us who have all those physical faculties, that's almost unimaginable. And it's a horror thought, like, oh, none of us ever want to go there.
Right.
So how on earth do you come through that?
Well, I was very fortunate that I've had a very supportive family and a very supportive group of friends who have been with me and helped me every step of the way.
Wow.
I mean, while I am so physically limited, they kept emphasizing the fact that I still have my mind and that there's still an awful lot I can do. And they basically assured me they will act as my arms and legs to make sure I could still do everything I wanted to do. And with their help and support, I went back to school, earned a few degrees, and then have worked for quite a lengthy period of time. And I've been really, really fortunate that I've had a lot of help.
Wow. Yeah. Give us an idea of what kind of work you've done.
Okay. Well, first, I worked for a couple of years as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, counseling other individuals who had severe disabilities. And I did that at a facility called Abilities Incorporated here on Long Island, which is now part of the Viscardi Center, named for its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr. And I worked there as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, counseling other individuals with severe disabilities, both in vocational counseling as well as in placement counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for a little more than 2 years and left there to go to law school. So I went to law school, Hofstra University Law School. And after graduation, I went to work at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office.
Wow.
Where I worked for more than 40 years.
Oh, my goodness.
I was an assistant district attorney. I was promoted a number of times. And I eventually became one of their deputy bureau chiefs, where I was helping supervise more than 25 other assistant district attorneys. And after more than 40 years, last year, I retired completely. I initially stopped working full-time 8 years ago and was just working part-time for the last 8 years. And last year, I retired full-time.
Congratulations on a very successful career, obviously, to be doing that same thing. That's kind of like a rarity these days, somebody doing the same job for 40 plus years. My dad did that. My dad worked for one company for 44 years. So I understand that. But for any, for a millennial or even for many Gen X's, that's almost impossible.
Well, I enjoyed the work very much. It was very challenging, but also it meant a lot to me to help others in the way that I was helping others as an assistant district attorney. So it was very gratifying work.
Good for you. Yeah, that's really something. So I kind of asked the question, you kind of answered it a little bit, but let's go into it in depth. The question is, how do you get through something like this? Now, you answered it in terms of how you had a lot of help, which is great. I mean, anybody who is going through something like that, they want to have as much help as possible. But that doesn't change the fact that you have to go through it. And there's a lot. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine all that you have to go through. I'm trying to imagine what your day-to-day life is like. And it's completely different from what any of the rest of us know. And the challenges that are associated with that are almost mind-boggling.
Well, I need help doing virtually everything. I mean, I cannot wipe my nose or scratch an itch or roll over in bed or dress myself. Or do virtually anything most people do for themselves. But as I say, I was fortunate that my family and friends really bonded together and helped me every step of the way. And throughout that time, I've made a lot of good friends. And one of the work experiences that I mentioned was that I worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And I found that so rewarding and gratifying that I finally had the opportunity to pay back to others. Because now I was in a position to help others. And there's nothing more gratifying than being in a position where you can help others. And I was fortunate I had that opportunity. And when I left to go to law school, I felt that now I was doing public service work and still felt very fortunate that I'm in a position to help others. So, I have a lot to be thankful for, but the proudest accomplishments that I have and what I'm most thankful is what is developed in my personal life. So if you'll allow me, I'd just like to share that with you and your listeners.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
In 2003, I married my incredible wife, Anna. She's absolutely incredible. I was very fortunate to meet and fall in love with Anna. And in 2003, we got married. And when I married my wife, she said to me that she'd like to have my baby.
Oh, my goodness.
Not just a baby, my baby. And I must say, this seemed impossible.
Yeah.
At the time, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years.
Wow.
And I was already in my 50s. Well, there's a saying in the military that I've always liked. It's the difficult we do it once, The impossible takes a little longer.
The CBs, yeah.
All right. Well, we were determined to make the impossible happen. So we looked into various options, including in vitro fertilization. And we're very excited to learn that it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we pursued in vitro fertilization. And through the miracle of science, my wife, Anna, became pregnant.
Wow.
And on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room when my wife, Anna, gave birth to triplets.
Triplets. Oh, my goodness. Oh,
We had 3 incredible sons, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy. They're now 19 years old. They're sophomores in college at 3 different schools in upstate New York and doing incredibly great. So I've got an awful lot to be thankful for. And all of that would never have happened had I not had my injury. I never would have met my wife, but for that. I mean, I met my wife because she was originally helping me on weekends to help me get through my daily activities. And as a result of that, our relationship developed. We fell in love. And 21 years later, we're proud parents of 19-year-old triplet boys.
That's fabulous. Wow, what a story. Boy, talk about the turnaround.
Right. So
really
I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. And although listeners, for the most part, can only hear audio on this particular show, on this podcast, I mean, as Ken's telling the story, he's grinning ear to ear. Like his cheeks are rosy. He's like so excited.
You bet. Well, we just had a great week where our boys were home for Thanksgiving vacation. And it's just great to see how they're all doing. That's terrific.
Fabulous. That is fabulous. So you're sitting here 54 years later. You've been through all this. You have all this gratitude. I think probably one of the first questions people want to ask is, how do you manage to be grateful given what you've gone through?
Well, I get up each day and I know that I've got a choice to make at the beginning of each day. I could feel very sad and depressed all day, or I could think about all the good things in my life and decide that it's going to be a good day and that I could feel happy. And as I say, I've been blessed to be the father of 3 incredible sons, to be the husband of an incredible wife, to have had the opportunity to help a lot of people in my job as an assistant district attorney, and before that as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. I've got an awful lot to be thankful for and an awful lot of things that give me enjoyment. I choose to be happy.
I like the fact that you're emphasizing that it's the choice, because it's a choice that we all have. We don't always make it. Do you have any ideas on that? Why is it that sometimes we choose the happiness and sometimes we don't?
One of the things that I like to tell people is you cannot always control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And I think that's what's so important. And I think people have to realize you have a choice. Again, while there are days where you just feel like, oh, it's such a shame this happened to me. And I can't control what happened that day. I can't control the weather, whether it's going to be a sunny day or a rainy day. But I can control my emotions and how I'm going to react to it. And I choose to be happy. I choose that it's going to be a good day and that I'm going to do my best to make it so.
Along those same lines, in a very, very small way, I'm experiencing that immediately, because in the past week I've been dealing with a cold and trying to overcome it. Listeners may recognize that my voice sounds a bit raspy today. So one thing I can tell you is you're going to be doing most of the talking, Ken, because my throat's just not up to it today.
Okay.
But that's all right. I mean, I want this to be your story because I think your story is really compelling. You make it sound very simple, rather, something that is very challenging. You make it sound very, very simple. And it is simple. I mean, certainly it's a topic and an idea that we've talked about quite a bit here on the show over the years. But as simple as it is, it's a day-to-day thing for everybody, not just for somebody who's been through the kind of experience you went through, but for everybody. Everybody is going through it on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, I was experiencing it just the past few days. I literally was going through some pains, some frustration, and just general challenges. And there were a lot of times where I just wasn't feeling up to feeling good. I just wasn't feeling up to putting myself into a good frame of mind. But then there are also the opportunities that come along, like doing the show with you, like doing this podcast that I do 3 times a week. And those, like when you're talking about how much gratitude you felt for all the people who've been there for you, all the experiences you've had, all the wonderful blessings that have come your way. I feel very much the same way about doing the podcast. I guess what I'm trying to lead up to here is we all have these opportunities that come along. We all have the good sides of our lives, the bad sides, the in-between sides, and so forth. And it's easier to find the positives on the good stuff. I mean, I have no trouble getting myself up to do the show. It's all, I don't care that I got a gravelly throat. I don't care that I might not even be able to finish the show today. This may even go like 45 minutes instead of an hour. It's okay. I feel up for it because I always have this great experience doing it. And so it just keeps fulfilling me. So that's always an easier thing. But when we're dealing with stuff that is the not so easy stuff, that's when there's a real challenge. That's when it's the hardest to make that choice, to choose the positive side, to choose the happier side, to choose the side of appreciation and gratitude. Talk about that for us, because if there's anybody who understands that side of it, it's you, I'm sure.
Well, I was brought up to try and look at the bright side of things. I mean, my family has faced challenges every step of the way. Just to take you back a little bit more about my early life, less than a month after I was born, my mother died. She died during the polio epidemic and had polio. And as a result, I have an older brother who had polio at the time too, although fortunately he totally recovered. And my brother, my father, and I went to live with my grandparents for a period of time. And my grandparents, both sets of grandparents, were such positive people and such a positive influence that, just overflowed with love and made us feel like we mattered to people, that we were loved, and that we will get through any challenges that are put in our way. And I think as a result of that upbringing, we were taught to look at the bright side of things. We were taught that we could overcome any challenges that were put in our way. And we've had a lot of help and a lot of support every step of the way. But that's how we were brought up. We have a choice, and we chose to be happy and to make the most of what was sometimes a bad situation, but many times was a terrific situation. And I look back and think I had a very happy upbringing, and I have a lot to be grateful for.
I understand that. Yeah. And certainly it makes a lot of sense. If you have that kind of background, it is going to be the easier path because it's just part of your programming. It's part of your nervous system. What about for somebody though who doesn't have that kind of a background? What can you tell them?
It's really difficult that if you don't have the people supporting and encouraging you, it is a lot more difficult to feel positive about what's taking place around you. And what I can say is what I've said earlier. You cannot always control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And there's an awful lot of good things going on in the world, an awful lot of things you can still do no matter what your situation is. Sometimes it's always darkest before the dawn. And there's a lot to keep your hopes up for, and keeping hope alive and being hopeful is so important. One of the messages that I want to convey is also it's important to keep your expectations high. When I was injured, there were people in the medical profession who seemed to have very limited expectations of what I would ever be able to do.
Sure.
In fact, the medical profession seemed to think the best I would ever be able to do would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Now, I was encouraged to do more than that by my family. And I went back to school, got not only a bachelor's degree, but 2 master's degrees. worked for a couple of years as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and then went to law school. Now, anybody looking back at it now who thought the best I would ever be able to do would be able to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone needs to take a look at what their expectations were and decide they need to start keeping expectations higher, not only for themselves, because it's important to have high expectations for yourself, but for others as well. Because so often your expectations can have a profound effect on what others eventually accomplish. And by keeping your expectations high, hopefully you'll accomplish more as a result, and others will accomplish more as a result.
So you believe strongly in those high expectations?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
High expectations are an interesting, I don't want to mischaracterize it. I'm looking for the right adjective. So I'll just go with what's coming to mind, and then I'll say, but I don't really mean what you think. But expectations are an interesting game to play. And the reason I say that is if we set our expectations high and we continuously feel like we're missing them, then the expectations can actually start to weigh us down. But by the same token, if we have our expectations high and we're able to achieve them to some degree, that has the other kind of effect. It has the reinforcement effect of, yes, you're on the right kind of path here. Sure, you've run into some adversity, but your expectations can come true. So you're going to be a lot less likely to believe that it's not going to work.
You know, Walt, I don't advocate having unrealistic expectations. I believe you need to keep your expectations realistic. But by the same token, just because something has not been done before doesn't mean you cannot do it now. So don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the people who tell you can't do something or that it's just too difficult. What's important is what you believe you can do, that you need to believe in yourself. You know, when you asked me how come I was able to do certain things and others may not have been able to accomplish as much as I've been able to do, you know, one of the things I was disappointed in was many of the patients I met in the rehab center were not doing a lot with their lives. And I believe a lot of that had to do with the expectations the medical personnel and their families had for them.
Sure.
I mean, the expectations seem to be you have a disability, you know, you need to accept that. And as a result, a lot of people were sitting home thinking, well, I'm not expected to do anything more than sit at home. After all, I've got a disability. Whereas if they were encouraged that they could still do a lot with their disability, I think more and more people would have gone back to school or gone to work and been able to accomplish far more than they were doing. And I believe it's so important to keep those expectations high and to encourage others to go on and do even more than they believe they can do.
I agree with you. I think you're right. I also am mindful of the way I started the podcast by pointing out that you've been dealing with this for 54 years quite successfully. 54 years for someone who is a quadriplegic is well outside the norm. I mean, the averages are not good for somebody who is in.
No, they're very low. And I've been very fortunate that I've had very good care at home, mostly from my wife for these last 20 plus years, but from others as well. And it's so important to get the proper care and, you know, to follow, you know, the proper medical advice, you know, when, you know, you're encouraged to be healthy, you know, eat healthy, do healthy things with your life, protect yourself when you can. But also, it's important to keep the proper mental attitude because I believe having the right attitude helps keep you healthy as well. And it helps you be able to accomplish far more than anybody thinks would be possible. So, having that right attitude is just as important as being physically healthy, sometimes even more so.
I believe that, and that's one of the reasons I went back to that point, the fact of how successful your longevity has been. I don't know that you can actually imagine this, and I'm not sure I want you to even to stay focused on it for very long. But if you can imagine for a second that you didn't have the positive mental attitude, you didn't have that level of support and so forth, isn't it fair to say you probably wouldn't be here?
Absolutely. Oh, there were so many times when I was very sick, very ill from different problems. I mean, I had COVID 3 times. I've had bronchitis and other respiratory infections many, many times. And if I didn't have this help and support that I had, that kept me maintaining that strong will to survive and overcome it, it would have been real easy to just succumb and not to have made it through those illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the fortunate ones. And I think that's what's so important. People need to know that there are others in their corner, backing them, helping them, supporting them, and encouraging them to do the best they can do.
One of the things that I've encouraged people to do, particularly those who don't have the kind of support system that you've described, is I've encouraged them to try to develop a social network. And not only develop it, my friend Joel and I will be doing a show later on today. Um, we also have talked about how you want to select who's in your network. You want to make sure that the people who are in your network are contributing energy to you rather than taking energy away from you. They're contributing to and they're oriented to some degree in your well-being, just as you're oriented to some degree in their well-being, as opposed to people who are constantly tearing you down. That I mean, it's one thing to not have a positive support network. It's almost another thing to have a negative support network, a support network, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to a moment ago.
Absolutely. It's so important. I mean, I was fortunate that I have a terrific family. I mean, you can't choose who your family members are, but you can choose who your friends are and
Mm.
who you want to associate with. And, I certainly advocate being around positive people, people that are going to support you and make you feel good, or people that you can help yourself as well and make them feel better. But there are a lot of people that have negative attitudes out there that don't help themselves and do not help you being around them. Now, when I talk about my family, I have a terrific brother and sister, but I'm talking about aunts, uncles, cousins,
Mm.
distant relatives, everyone bonded together to help each other. And I just think that's so important. Somebody doesn't need to be a relative to help you or for you to help somebody else. If we all help each other, there's so much more we all can do, and we all benefit from it.
And when you were talking earlier about the importance of choosing a positive mental attitude, choosing to believe that you can you can set high expectations and so forth. Part of that is choosing who's in your network.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't help you to surround yourself with people that, are constantly putting you down or saying you can't do something or saying they can't do anything. And there's just this whole negative atmosphere around you. That doesn't help anybody. It's so important, to keep your expectations high, to try and keep your emotions high, and to recognize you have a choice as to how you're going to react to whatever happens to you.
I said earlier I might not be able to make it through the show. I think that's actually the case. My throat is not behaving very well right now. So
I
I'm going to have to
understand.
cut it a little bit closer than I normally would by about a half an hour. Um,
Okay.
but I do want to ask that you share a couple of things. First of all, someone who wants to reach out and contact you, how do they reach you?
They can go on my website, which is kenkunken.com. And the website will tell you more information about me, as well as different ways that you could that you could purchase my book. And that's probably the best way to reach out to me. kenkunken.com.
That's wonderful. I love that. Second thing I want to do is I want to take a moment to thank you on behalf of the people who not only, I mean, you've already had direct contact with people you've been able to help directly, But I'm sure through your book, through your outreach, through podcasts and so forth, there are many people you've been able to help that you never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see. And you've been helping them in ways you didn't even know about, particularly people who've been going through the same kinds of things you've been going through. I find that all of us go through lives learning various things along the way through our own traumatic troubles, through our own pain, our own struggles, and we don't get recognized for the ways that we help people that we don't even know about. So that's why I like to take the moment to say thank you, Ken, for what you've been doing, for all the people
thank you,
you
Walt.
didn't know about.
I appreciate that. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, is I've had a number of people tell me that when they've learned about my story, it has helped motivate and inspire them to do more with their lives. And that makes me feel really, really good to hear that. So, if there's any way that I could help people do more with their lives, I certainly want to do that. And I just might add that when I was working in the district attorney's office, I was told a number of times by some of my fellow assistant district attorneys that one of the best parts of their job was meeting, getting to know, and working with me. Now, I don't say that, Walt, to boast or brag. I know they weren't referring to working with Ken Kunken. They were talking about working with somebody who had a significant disability. Because a lot of people, unless they have a close relative with a disability, never have the opportunity to spend much time, certainly not on a daily basis, with somebody with a disability. And I know they found that they gained a lot by being around somebody with a disability and seeing what makes us tick, and that we all basically have the same needs, wants, and desires as everybody else. And I think they felt they've grown a lot as a person by being exposed to people with disabilities. And I encourage your listeners, I encourage all the employers out there to take advantage of the opportunity to employ otherwise qualified individuals who just happen to have a disability when they have a job opening, to employ somebody with a disability. Everybody benefits from that.
I wish so much I could continue this conversation with you, but my throat's letting me down. But boy, I mean, I'd love to go into a number of different directions here. Instead, I'll just say thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being such an inspiration.
Well, thank you for having me, and please feel better.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Hopefully very soon. That'd be a good thing.
Great.
So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on Elevate Today. Goodbye, everybody.